Hello. There are 3 people in here with us. Sorry if you caught the false start to this jam a couple minutes ago. The interface is a little different every time. And actually this time Facebook warned me, we've moved things around. And I'm like, oh, isn't that nice? All right, let's get it going on
Happy spring.
the other device. Happy spring. Hi, Christine. All right, I'm seeing it here.
Hey, Sandy.
12 people in the jam. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Sheila. Hi, Ron.
Boy,
All right.
I wish I could see better. Like that to be able to tell.
Okay.
Very attractive.
Welcome to our old time jam. This is the last one of the season, for better or for worse. What do you need to see?
Is it?
Yeah, it's good. There's
Okay.
just text down there.
Okay.
Let's maybe drop it just a hair.
Yeah. Just a hair.
See, the interface is just a little different every time. All right, I think that's better. We're starting this jam in the key of A for a change. So often when we do 2-key jams, we start in D and make it to A, and we kind of give that key short shrift, but there's so many great A tunes. I've got the fiddle cross-tuned A, E, A, E. And some of the stuff on our A list I think would play okay in standard, but a lot of it really needs this tuning, so I hope you're willing to give it a try. You're going to leave your capo on for all of A, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be playing entirely with G, C, and D position.
Yep.
For the key of A.
No special chords in our A set. A little bit that we'll need to talk about chord-wise when we switch over to D, but that won't be for a while. So we're just going to groove a little bit, and we hope you're grooving along with us. If you're not able to see as much of Beth as you need or want to see, please comment to that effect. It's still a little hard to tell what all people are able to see and not able to see. Okay, hi Steve, hi Donna. Great. I think we're ready.
Filming?
Yes, it is.
Thank you for the color, Donna.
That's right, Donna.
We're
our
excited.
baking consultant.
Yeah, we're excited to give it a whirl.
All right, the first tune we're going to play is Brushy Run. This is a version from Ed Haley, who played it in G, and I just can't get my fingers wrapped around the G fingering, so I'm grateful to Bruce Molsky, among other people, who put it up in cross A and made it a little nicer to play. Still
getting
getting
really
warmed up over here.
I was getting really cracked up because we are playing the chord progression slightly different on that one than we used to. We used to play that tune for dances a lot. If any of you ever do dances, it's a good tune for that. But we were changing it up a little bit, and I don't know if y'all can tell when Adam has giving me the hairy eyeball, but it cracks me up every time he does. He doesn't even look. He just kind of, his whole, like, he gets kind of buzzard-like, you know, or something.
And I can feel you seeing it
Without
looking at you.
So the first time out, I did it wrong. And he stiffened up, and his eyebrows started doing things.
It's okay.
So anyway.
Just doesn't matter. We got there in the end, right?
Oh, well. So this one, I want to send this one out. Okay. We learned this tune, I think. Tell me if I'm wrong. We learned this tune from the Troublesome Creek CD, right?
That's right. And this particular one was just a fiddle banjo duet before the rest of the band kicked in.
Right. So we want to send this out to the wonderful fiddler Rick Martin and to Steve Arkin.
The wonderful banjo player.
Inimitable, did I say that right?
Yes.
Steve Arkin.
That's right. Inimitable in so many ways.
Inimitable.
Yep.
Great word.
This is Possum Up a Simmon Tree. And I think it's from Buddy Thomas originally, but you'll have to ask Rick and Mark about that.
Yeah.
Because we just learned it from them. Rick and
Steve.
Why did I say that? Whatever.
Because we were talking about what a great bass player Mark Bill was earlier today.
Yeah, maybe that's it. And he's from Charlottesville, just like Rick Martin.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Possum Up a Simmon Tree.
Yeah.
And it does not have a 7 chord in it, even if it might sound like there is one. a Simmon tree.
That one is so much fun to play.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I said there is no 7-chord in that tune, but that's because there wasn't one on the Rick Martin, Steve Arkin recording that we learned it from, just fiddle and banjo. I haven't actually heard the Buddy Thomas recording, if there is a Buddy Thomas recording, to know whether there was guitar accompaniment, and if so, whether the guitarist played a 7-chord. But we didn't hear a 7-chord from the fiddle and the banjo, and we like it with just the 1-4-5. Hope you did too.
Yeah. See if it's anything we need to attend to.
All right. Hi, Terry. Glad you're here. Jackie McKenzie is watching down
Jackie.
under. Hello. Steve. Hello. Bob Carbone. Barb Zavon was in the house a little while ago. Don't know if she's still there. Hello, Barb. And Mark.
Yeah.
Everybody able to see Beth's hands well enough? It's a little hard to tell tonight. If you need the camera repositioned at all, just chat and we'll try to take care of it. We're going to play a tune now that we learned from our good friends Tricia Spencer and Howard Raines out in Kansas. They've brought so many wonderful tunes into circulation from Kansas and from Texas and from other parts of the world too. This is called Waterloo. It showed up on their wonderful red CD, the Old Texas Fiddle Volume 2. That's such a good album, and if you don't have
Incredible
that,
album.
you should add it to your libraries right now.
And do you remember what this tune is about?
I do. Tell them.
This tune is about Austin, Texas. Its original name was Waterloo.
Yeah.
And
Did you know that? I didn't
who
know
knew?
that.
Yeah. And this session alone, we're trying to do 2 or 3 slower tunes, just for something different.
Yeah.
And this one is it's not a waltz, but it's just
Nice
a
and
really
slow.
beautiful, slow, lovely tune.
Yeah, we like it a lot.
So-
So thanks to Howard and Tricia for bringing this our way.
Yeah. That was the look.
sweet tune, Waterloo. Love that one.
That was a little bit of a rickety beginning there.
It's okay. You chorded it a bunch of different ways, and they all
Bunch of
worked.
different ways.
They all
Take your
work.
pick.
That's right.
Well, it works out.
Okay. Yay. Hey, Brian. Thanks for joining in. All right, let's play Chinquapin Hunting. Chinquapin Hunting is a crooked tune, if you don't know it. It has 3 parts, and the first of them is a peculiar length. But the next 2 are a more predictable length, and the good thing is they all 3 sound really different from each other, so I don't think you'll get lost in the whole tune form.
Where's this one from?
This is from not far away from here. I think this is from Uncle Norm Edmonds, or one of his peers, if not him, from down around Carroll County, Virginia.
Okay.
100 miles or so west of where we sit right now. Let's Google that when we're done. But I think it's Uncle Norm Edmonds. Nice tune, though. Hope you all enjoy it, too. maybe the live stream interrupted for a moment. There was a message about poor wireless signal, and looked like this went black for a split second. Sorry if that cut off. Are we rolling still? Can someone chat and let us know whether we're still there with you? Hope so. Looks like it. I mean, it's coming in on the other device here. Oh well, that's a new one.
Yeah.
Let's play that Oklahoma Gray Eagle. Hi, Emma. Glad you're here with us. Oklahoma Gray Eagle. This is such a fun tune. It doesn't really sound like those other Gray Eagles, but you've probably heard it around. It's been circulating for the last number of years. Raina Gellert made an awfully nice recording of it with Susie Gehring, and I think that helped it circulate. And if I understand correctly, Tom Sauber really dug this one out of that Marion Thede fiddle book and kind of translated it from dots on the page into music that the rest of us could make sense of. So thank you to Tom Sauber for all of that great work and getting this wonderful tune into circulation. All right. Comfortable?
Reasonably.
Do the hokey pokey over there.
Yeah, right.
that fun to play?
Boy,
That's one of our favorites.
And I think we are both illustrating that you don't need to play perfectly to have a good time.
No, you sure don't. Aren't we having fun? Aren't we having fun?
I think perfection is out the window tonight.
Yeah. Oh, Joanna Harkness in the house. Hi, Joanna.
Hey, sweetie.
That's Beth's daughter. I hope she's out there playing the banjo along with us.
She's a good banjo player.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Play that a little more, please. Thank you.
We got a lot of animal tunes tonight, aren't we?
We do.
Possum, eagle, dogs, sheep, mules,
Mule. Mm-hmm.
horses.
Yeah, a few.
A lot of animal
If we make it all the way through. How about that?
Yeah.
What are your favorite animal tune titles? Let us know in the chat.
One's in the second set is my favorite.
That's the favorite animal tune
Uh-huh.
title. Well,
Uh-huh.
it really goes with the sound of the
it
tune,
really
doesn't
does.
it?
Yeah.
All right, here comes another animal tune. Granny, will your dog bite? There are a lot of different grannies, will your dog bite? Granny, will your dog bites? How would you put that in plural? Anyway, we got this
Granny,
one.
will your dog bite and we'll all take tea? That's not right, is it?
It should be. That's a hilarious
It rhymes,
one.
sort of.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, whatever.
That sounds like something from Little Red Riding Hood, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
This Granny, will your dog bite? I don't know anything about other than that we learned it from our dear friend Fiddle and Stephanie Coleman, who played a great rendition of it in the final round of the fiddle contest at Clifftop many years ago. And the moment I heard that tune, I was like, oh, I've got to learn that one, and I've got to learn it from her, and I've got to learn it the way that she
You
does
said
it.
that about every single tune you ever heard Stephanie play.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty
All
much.
of her tunes and her versions are just the best. Now I need to ask her where she got this one, because it's not the one Tommy Gerald played. But it's a really cool tune. It's a little bit like Fire on the Mountain, if you know Fire on the Mountain. And it goes where you might expect. So let's play a little Granny, will your dog bite? take tea. I love that.
Whatever.
We're going to have to call it that from now on. That's Granny, will your dog bite? Hope you like it as much as we do.
Is there anything we
Let's
need to be
see
aware of?
if anything is being said. These comments keep disappearing, and then I struggle to make them show up again. There we go. All right. People are playing along.
Yay.
I'm so glad.
Yay.
So glad. Terry says, Raccoon Tail, the ring goes round. That's a nice tune title.
Huh.
Horse and Buggy-O. Yeah, that's another one. You know, that should go on another list. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Janet, for suggesting.
We love Art Stanford.
I'd need to brush up on that one a little bit, but stay tuned. Maybe in the fall. We're going to bring these back in the fall if there still seems to be interest in online jams.
Since we did this one, we did the Floyd Store Handmade School camp, and it was great to be back in that kind of environment.
So much fun.
Again, and having a big jam session and
where you could hear one another.
You could hear each other, and everybody was in the onion, and it was just lovely. And we're very excited, and we hope all you guys are going to get back out this year.
Yeah.
Cliff Top is on.
Who's going to Cliff Top? Assuming it stays on. They've
Yeah.
got a flashy new website.
Barb, I hope you and Mark are coming.
Yeah. Let us know if you're coming to Cliff Top in the comments. And we mentioned this in the last jam, but I think we should mention it again. Cliff Top is asking people to pre-register for the contest this year, and I don't think it's binding. I think if you register and decide you're not feeling competing or it's raining or something, you don't have to compete. But I'm wondering if they're using the pre-registration for contests as a means of estimating the crowd size. So if you think you'll even possibly be there, maybe consider registering for one of the contests. It's free.
Have we registered?
Not yet. It's due sometime in July.
What if does it include band?
I think so.
'Cause,
I think so.
I mean,
and I think the
there's
band
no
members have to
contest
be
that I can
chosen in
register for.
advance. Well, you could register for flat footing or something.
right.
Why not? You know how to flat foot.
So do you.
Well, just enough to be dangerous. Anyway, let the people at the Division of Culture and History in West Virginia know how much you've missed the Cliff Top
Barb say?
Festival.
Are they
Barb
coming?
says, hope we can.
Yay!
I hope you can too. Yeah, let them know how much you've missed the festival and how much you're looking forward to being there this summer, assuming all goes according to plan. We just can't wait.
Everybody, it's just it's always been great to jam with other people, but I think it's especially precious after the last 2 years.
Sure
And,
is. Tell about this next tune.
Oh, yeah. I was fortunate enough to get to see the fellow this tune came from play it, and he was a lovely person. Ernie Carpenter brought this tune about. It's if you see it written out, it's spelled Horneyewe, but it's pronounced the Horney Ewe.
Horney Ewe.
The Horney Ewe, yeah. And
That's how he pronounced it.
That's how he
right?
pronounced it, yeah. And I just think it's one of the prettiest songs I've ever heard. It's funny how these animal tunes can be some of the, maybe it's the warm fuzzy aspect or something.
Yeah.
But this is just a lovely, lovely tune. And one of the hallmarks of this tune is that it has a breath
Yeah.
in it.
You could call this a crooked tune if you want, because it counts out irregularly, but it's not like there's any music in the crookedness. It's at the very end of the beat part as the tune gets ready to restart, and it's just
Just take
Just
a
like
breath
that.
before you start. Literally.
yeah. You'll hear it.
You'll hear it come.
It's so nice.
But it allows you to start back up and get moving again.
Yeah. All right.
Hornea. There are words to this tune. If anybody, I don't know them, but Peterson and Kelly Allen know the words
Oh,
to
yeah?
this.
Okay.
I think
haven't heard
Doug Van
those.
Gundy might know the words to this.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear them. Not too fast.
Isn't that pretty?
Mm-hmm.
I just love that tune.
That was a good idea. Beth came up with that idea for the list. She came up with most of the list this time, actually, didn't you?
I did indeed.
Well done. Well done. Here's another animal tune.
Yeah.
And this is another one that we should send out with thanks to Tom Sauber. This is the Bobtailed Mule, which came from K.C. Karshner of Arizona.
Easy for you to say.
And I'm not sure I got it quite right. But anyway, he was the source of a bunch of really distinctive sounding tunes. It's like everything I've heard that went back to him had a really unusual sound. And it's thanks in large part to Tom Sauber's efforts that those tunes have gotten into circulation. I feel like the old-time community just owes Tom an enormous debt of gratitude for all the fine playing for decades, but also the sharing of tunes and information about old musicians. So thanks, Tom. Thanks to Raina Gellert again, who recorded this with Susie Gehring. She recorded it under a different title. Another one of K.C. Karshner's tunes is called Buck and Dun, and she called Bobtailed Mule Buck and Dun, and that created years of confusion in the old-time community, but it's actually Bobtailed Mule. Just checking the comments. All good. Hi, Sarah. Hello, Sue. Oh, yay. So wonderful to see everyone. All right, Bobtailed Mule. This is a little crooked too, but it's crooked in a really predictable way. The A part has an extra phrase in it, but the extra phrase is just a repeat of an earlier phrase. Nothing y'all can't handle. Bobtailed Mule. That's really fun to play.
Yeah, it is.
Love that. And it doesn't really sound like anything else, does it?
It'd be a good dance tune, right?
Well, except for that extra thing.
Man.
It'd be good for a square dance that's not like called to the length of the music.
And that was a real pleasure. We got to play the first dance we played in
forever
for years at the Floyd camp.
Yeah.
Phil Jameson calling. It was his first dance he called
in 2 years.
In 2 years, he said.
And we've been totally out of playing dances for longer than 2 years.
Life might be getting a little bit more back to what we remember.
Let's hope.
Maybe.
Let's hope. All right, we've got 2 more to play in A, and then we'll switch over to D. We'll give you banjo players and fiddlers fair warning. No worries there. This is Lacy Brown. This is a tune from John Salyer that we like a whole lot. And it's a whole lot like ordinary Gray Eagle, not the Oklahoma Gray Eagle that we played earlier today, which is Gray Eagle in name only. But if you know some sort of average, pleasant Gray Eagle in A, you might be able to play a lot of that and get by with this Lacy Brown. It's got a lot of quick chord changes in the B part, right?
Yes.
Maybe not quite so fast. What do you say?
Yeah, maybe not.
That's a workout. Isn't
Yeah, it was. I love that progression. It just kind of makes you happy.
It sure does. Awfully fun to play.
Yeah.
Christy Lou, hello.
Hey.
Mark Sahlgren, hello. Looking forward to seeing you at Midwest Banter Camp. Terry Hayes, hi.
Hey.
David, hello. So many friends. All right.
We sure appreciate you coming in. We sure have had a good time doing this
Absolutely.
thing. It seems like it's smart to take a break so everybody can get outside and do things.
Yep.
Instead of being inside on Zoom or Facebook. But
Would you like more of these in the fall? Let us know in the comments.
yeah, please let us know.
And if there are particular trajectories you'd like more or less of, let us know that in the comments too. We have a lot of A tunes, a lot of D tunes. We've done one G jam, and I'd like to do more of those. We did a modal jam. We have more of that stuff.
We might do C.
We might do C. We don't
could
know a
do-
ton of C tunes, but they can be a little fun.
You could do, was it A, not cross tune.
Oh, standard A.
Standard A.
Yeah, but not necessarily modal. That could be interesting. We could do calico tunes. Do a lot of different things. Let us know what you'd like if you want more of this in the fall. And we promise to not oversaturate the online marketplace. So one more in the key of A, and then we'll switch. This is The Road to Westfield from Gary Harrison. Do you know the tune? It has a little trick for the fiddle if you don't know the tune. The B part's theme sounds way harder than it actually is. Here it comes again. And the way you do that on the fiddle, let's see if I can even show you. Boy, it's weird to get into the frame. So orient around the first finger on the E, do a low second finger ornament, and then the same thing on the A, and the same thing on the D, assuming you're in cross tuning. It's just the same pattern of first finger kind of carrying the main note and the ornament coming from a low second finger. And if you just move that unit over from string to string to string, the rest of it is pretty much automatic. Hope that helps. When I figured out the trick,
And if you
the
wanna-
rest of the tune was kind of a cinch, and I thought, oh, I'll never be able to learn that tune.
We don't know where it is on Gary Harrison's recordings,
I
right?
think it's on the Red Prairie Dawn
It's on Red
album.
Prairie Dawn.
We haven't listened to that. in a
I
while.
learned it from Jack Burgess, Jackie Burgess, and Ken Inouye, and
What was
John
that band
Bloom.
called?
Oh, Lord, you would ask me. Stanley County
Stanley County Boys.
Boys.
Right.
yeah.
They did
So,
record a nice
Jack
version
Burgess,
of it.
Annie
Griffey.
Griffey,
Mm-hmm.
and I forgot who the other person was.
Ken Inouye.
Ken,
John Bloom.
John Bloom, Jackie.
That's probably
Annie.
everybody, right?
I think it was a fifth person.
Oh, yeah.
I forget. Anyway, that's a really fun CD, and it's got some really funky tunes on it. And this was one of them.
Play that a little bit more. My tuning is just not holding tonight. That's better. All right.
comment on. So I used to play it one way, and then we started working on playing it a different way for this jam. So I remembered parts of both, and so you can kind of, guitar players, if you want to listen back to what I'm doing, you can choose the one way I did it or the other way I did it.
The earlier turnaround or the later one, and they both work. And I guess it's a good thing there's only one chord player in here right now, because you're never conflicting with anyone.
I would have completely bumfuddled the bass player, I think. But,
Maybe.
But yeah, it's like you said, there's no right or wrong way. It's just a matter of preference.
Yeah.
As long as it goes with the chord structure and the tune structure and
Otherwise,
everything.
it's all good.
So, anyway.
We're moving
There was
to the
a lot
key of
of
D.
eyebrow wiggling going on over
Yes.
there. Yeah. Oh,
All right. But we made it,
we made it.
Why don't you double check? I need to get a ways over there. I'm going to standard tuning, although I think a lot of this stuff would play fine in the high bass detuning if you like to tune that way. AEAE. I will be in GDAE though. Yeah, sounds nice. But not far. There, that'll work. Let's check the comments while people are still getting in tune. Anybody need help getting in tune out there? Yes, Clifftop.
Yay!
Twyla says. Absolutely.
Who says?
Twyla.
Oh, Twyla.
Uh-huh. All right. Esther verifies that that tune is on the Red Prairie Dawn album. Thank you. Thank you. Sue wants more of these in the fall.
Yay!
Thank you. Oh, lots of people do. Donna, Libby, Ron, yay. Thank you all.
Really
All right,
appreciate
well,
it.
we will...
We're thinking September, October.
Yeah, somewhere in there we'll
Something
get
like that,
going
yeah.
again.
Well, the
Everybody ready for
festivals
D?
aren't over until September.
That's right.
So. But this is the one is my favorite animal title.
Yeah, you love this title. This is the Single Footing Horse. I think this is from Fiddle and Arthur Smith. I learned it from Claire Milliner, who plays an awfully good version of it.
It refers to the horse's gait
Yeah.
at the trot, single foot.
Single foot trot.
Yeah.
Single footing horse. This is kind of in the Durang's hornpipe family. If you're not familiar with this tune by name, it'll remind you of a lot of those tunes. Hey Monica, glad you're here. Monica.
A Monica.
All right. just picture it doing its trotting thing?
Absolutely. It makes me wish I had a horse.
Yeah, really fun.
So I usually talk about this when we're playing it, and I forgot to mention it ahead of time, but I play an A with one finger. So when you see this position, that's what that's going to be. But I particularly wanted to point that out because this next tune we do is going to have a different chord in it than, I don't think we hardly ever put this chord in anything.
Hardly anything.
Hardly anything.
But it's a sweet sound.
But it has, the chord is F sharp minor, and for the...
It's like a passing chord on the way to G.
Yeah, and I've always been all about the easier way of doing things, so it's not a full F sharp minor. I think it would, if you barred and maybe did that, it would be the full F sharp minor, I believe. But it's for me, it's exactly the same thing as the A, except moved over.
Yeah, cover the three treble-most strings.
Top three strings in the second fret, and it's going to be, like Adam said, a passing chord, but it's pretty important in this tune. And you also don't want to play above the G string, so that sound, because otherwise there's nothing's being held down over here,
right?
And it's not going to sound right.
You can get D string in, right? D and then the top three. Yeah, that's not a terrible sound, actually. Avoid the low E.
Whatever. But this is a very slow tune. It's a march. It's not a waltz.
Right.
And hopefully, you know, being a slow tune, it'll be easier to pick up the chords.
Absolutely.
As they go along.
And
they're pretty straightforward, except for the F sharp minor.
That comes up in the B part. This is Coleman's March, and this is not an uncommon tune, it seems, these days, but you may or may not be used to hearing it with that chord, and yet I think it really sounds sweet.
My dear friend Donna Carell, who passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately, used to sing, she and her band, the Wolf Brothers, had a tune that was a song that was written to the melody of Coleman's March, and it was called Southern Girl's Reply. And so that's what I always think of when I'm playing this tune. It helps me pace it.
Yeah.
But if you get a chance to listen to any Wolf Brothers CDs, they're fantastic. Especially Donna.
All right, not too fast. to hear Kathy Fink play that on the banjo.
She
Anybody
does a
out there
beautiful
familiar
job.
with Kathy's banjo version of Coleman's March? Love to play it with her on the banjo. Haven't had that opportunity very often, but it's always a treat. All right, are we going to do Rachel?
You're getting tired.
My back is getting tired, but that's okay. We don't have many left.
No, this is one of my favorites. I've been playing this one since the early days of getting in old time music. And I learned it. It was named Rachel when I learned it, but it's also was called Texas Quick Step by some people, and I don't know where it's from.
I got my fiddle version from Melvin Wine, but he's not the only one who played it. It's a fairly common tune, and it goes exactly where you expect it to go, right? Rachel or Texas Quick Step. Isn't that fun to play?
Sweet tune.
Love it. That's one of a small handful of tunes that I teach my banjo students as an introduction to a position that I call the triangle of fingers, which is a wonderful thing, but those first learning to use it just like quake in their boots hearing about it. It's a little scary. We have an important question here from Twyla. Thanks for asking. Twyla would love to know the guitar player's name. This is Beth Williams Hartness right here. Give her a hand.
Hi.
Isn't she wonderful? Love the way Beth plays the guitar. And this wouldn't be nearly as fun if it were without Beth on the guitar.
Thank you.
Truly, truly.
Appreciate that.
All right. We're going to do Ship in the Clouds.
Yeah, we've been getting, that one's been popular in the jam sessions lately.
Yeah, it got played a whole bunch up at Floyd the other weekend, and it's kind of a local tune to their Southwest Virginia tune. It's a little crooked.
It's
and
a little tricky.
I'll explain the crookedness right before we play it. It has a different chord in it, too.
It has
What
a
do you call
7.
it? That's right.
Yes.
It does have a
I'm
7.
learning the number system.
Yep.
After all these years.
And the letter name for that would be, in this key.
Wait a minute. C.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's a C chord, along with the other usual suspects. No more F sharp minor. And I actually taught a version of this tune in my banjo class at Floyd, which forced me to think about the way that it was organized for the first time. It's one that I played for a long time, but I'd never really taught it. And here's the way that I think of it as being organized. So the A part is the crooked part. Here's the first phrase. Here's the second phrase. And then the first phrase happens again. And that's it. So a 3-phrase A part that doesn't repeat before we go into the B. And here's the first phrase of B. The second phrase of B with that C chord. And that's a little bit of a long phrase. And then a final phrase. And then all of that repeats. B2. So both parts are crooked in their own distinct way. But you can use that C chord, that 7 chord is a little bit of a landmark because it only shows up in the B part. Shall we give it a try?
Yeah.
And if we crash and burn, well, if y'all crash and burn, we won't know. And if we crash and burn, we can just end it early.
It'll be immortalized.
That's right. fun. Hope you all had a good time with that.
Yeah. Send a shout out to Lee if he's still on. I saw him come on
Yeah,
a
I saw
minute
that
ago.
Lee was there. Amy Sternhell is here. Hi,
Yeah.
Amy. Good
Lee,
to see you.
those pics are fantastic. If you're still on, the pics I've never seen them, but they're just perfect.
Yeah, Lee and
Thank
Beth
you.
have been geeking out over
Exchanging
finger picks
finger
lately.
pics.
Hilarious.
Finger pics.
I love it.
So,
We're going to do one more tune. Before we do that, I'd like to direct everyone's attention to the pinned post as well as the description for this jam. We've got some tip jar links up there if you feel so inspired. No pressure, no worries. We enjoy doing this, and it helps keep us excited
practice.
about music and in practice.
Yeah.
Fall festivals aren't yet cranking again.
Yeah.
But we're hoping to see all of you at festivals very soon.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Clifftop roll call.
Yay!
Right?
Yeah.
We talk so much about Clifftop, but I just think it's the best thing there is.
And those of you who can, Mount Airie's fantastic. If you've never been, you should really make a chance to. We can't go this year because of
Midwest Banjo Camp,
but
which is its own special kind of
but
fun.
it'll be a special Mount Airie this year, I'm sure.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
Cannot wait for it all.
First full weekend in June.
June, that's right. All right. And again, feel free to let us know in the chat if you would like more of these in the fall and what sorts of thrusts you'd enjoy hearing. We aim to please any way we can.
Speaking of Mount Airie, we're
Speaking
going
of
to
Mount
send this
Airie.
out to one of the luminaries.
Right, in the memory of Benton
Ben
Flippin.
Flippin.
This is the Fiddler's Reel, and banjo players and guitar players and all of the rest of you out there are allowed to play on it too. Just because it's called the Fiddler's Reel doesn't mean it's for fiddlers only. All right. is real. Thanks to Beth and Flippin for that fine tune. And thanks to all of you for playing along. The only thing we don't like about these is we can't hear you play. But we can imagine how wonderful it sounded, and we hope you had a good time.
See if you need to address anything.
Let's see if I need to address any comments. More tunes in the fall, please. All right. All right.
If you think
we look
about
forward
it,
to scrolling all the way
if
through
you-
these in a little bit.
If you think about it, you have particular ideas for tunes that you might like put in a jam, let us know.
Yeah, put them in the comments if this video is still kind of fresh, or send them to us later on. We do read the comments and we do read our messages. We'd be grateful for any feedback you have. It was super fun to be here with y'all.
Happy
Thanks.
spring, and
Happy
hope to
spring.
see you in the summer.
That's right. Say hello at Clifftop. See you soon. Bye now.